Now, my dear land dwellers, I'm going to ask you to do something a little strange. Think of a person who hurt you deeply. Not just someone who upset you. Someone who really hurt you. Maybe it happened a year ago, maybe 5 years ago, or maybe back when you were still school. It doesn't matter. Now, remember a specific moment. Their words, their face, what exactly they did, and how badly you wanted to punch them. What did you feel just now? For many people, their bodies changes within seconds. Muscles become tense, the heartbeat speeds up, irritation appears. Sometimes there is even a strong urge to continue an old argument in their head. An amazing thing. The event ended long ago. There is no danger, that person isn't here, but for some reason the brain reacts as if a guy in red shorts is currently rearranging our facial features in a boxing ring. And the most surprising part is that this is not just a metaphor. This is one of the strangest questions in psychology. Because if you think about it, resentment doesn't live in the past. It keeps trying to get a permanent residence in the present. And it does it at your expense, like a distant relative who came for a visit and never left. Today we'll try to understand why the brain loves this rather questionable sport so much. Let's start with the bad news. Our brain isn't very interested in our happiness. I know it's never pleasant to hear that, especially from one of our own body parts. But from the point of view of evolution, the brain had a completely different job. Its goal wasn't to make us happy and not to help us reach our potential. Its task was very simple. Don't die until tomorrow, buddy. That's it. If it needs to make us anxious, no problem. Suspicious? Excellent. Holding grudges? Absolutely perfect. Evolution doesn't care whether we feel comfortable. It only cares about survival statistics. And this is where the story of resentment begins. Imagine you are a Stone Age human. You live in a tribe of 50 people. Actually, I can't imagine that either, but you try. One guy stole your food. Another one lied to you. A third one hit you on the head with a club. For a modern person, that's material for therapy. For an ancient human, a potential threat to life. So it was useful for the brain to remember people like that. To remember them very well. Evolution created a system. Remember the one who betrayed you. Thanks to this system, our ancestors got hit on the head with clubs less often. You have to admit, a very useful feature. The problem is that the system has no expiration date, no store in a cool dark place for 2 weeks. So sometimes the brain protects an old conflict as carefully as if it weren't a 10-year-old text conversation, but the country's nuclear launch codes. Because evolution failed to predict one thing. It had no idea that hundreds of thousands of years later there would be bats, and the internet, and insomnia, and the ability to remember an argument from 2019 at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh no!
Our brain wasn't designed for that. It was designed for mammoths. And now it's used for comments under videos. Look how we've successfully run aground. In short, our ancient brain isn't handling modern technology particularly well. The fact that we feel resentment isn't an evolutionary mistake. Quite the opposite. The ability to feel resentment, anger, distrust, and caution after being treated badly is actually an adaptive feature. If a person never remembers who deceived, used, or betrayed them, life will probably be very difficult. And possibly a quick, uncomfortable death.
We're gonna die!
So the problem isn't that the brain reacts to resentment. The problem is that sometimes the reaction keeps running after it stops serving a protective purpose. Let's imagine 2 situations. Scenario 1. A business partner betrays us, we remembered it, learned our lesson, stopped working with him, became more careful. Here resentment was useful. It helped us update our understanding of the world. Scenario 2. The same partner betrayed us, let's say 5 years ago. We no longer talk, that person has no influence on our life, no decisions need to be made anymore, but every week the brain brings us back to the same story. And here a question appears. What useful job is this reaction doing now? This is exactly the point that interests rumination researchers. Rumination. A very beautiful scientific word. It sounds like an expensive Italian dessert. In reality, it means something like this. Our brain has decided to review an old problem one more time, like a favorite soap opera. Then one more time, and again, and again, and 57 more encores. We are hooked. Researcher Susan Nolan-Hoeksema spent much of her career studying rumination, and its conclusions were quite unpleasant. When people constantly replay negative events, they usually think they are analyzing them, but most of the time they are doing something completely different. They are emotionally reliving the same event over and over again. Imagine someone watching the same horror movie every day and feeling scared every single time. This is roughly how rumination works. But things get even more interesting. Because scientists are curious people. They like stuffing all sorts of people into scanners and seeing what lights up inside. Conclusion? Scientists love anything that blinks. Buy them Christmas lights. This is exactly why in 2009 Eddie Harmon Jones and his colleagues put participants into a brain scanner and conducted a study with a very honest title, The Angry Brain. I'll leave all the links in the description. And the results were surprising. One important area involved was the anterior cingulate cortex. The name sounds like a county somewhere in Nebraska, but it's actually part of the brain. And this thing is involved in processing pain. Not only physical pain, but social pain as well. When you were told to fuck off, betrayed, humiliated, dumped by a 4-letter text. Some brain systems react almost as if our little toe had just met a bad leg.
Ow, ow, ow!
Not exactly the same, of course. You don't need to visit the emergency room after a breakup. But some of the neural mechanisms really do overlap. That is why the phrase, "that hurt to hear," is not just poetry. For the brain, it's partly real pain. The brain basically says, I don't care whether they broke your leg or your self-esteem, we are paying attention to this and suffering immediately. But the funniest discovery wasn't even that. Scientists found that anger and being stuck in anger are two different things. Anyone can get angry. It's free. But then the road splits. One person says, well, that guy is an asshole, whatever, and moves on. Another person says, I will dedicate the next 10 years of my life to this event, and signs a mental subscription to resentment. We are swimming confidently. Wrong way, still confident. This is where rumination appears. The brain starts working like a scratched record stuck in a broken player, and there is nobody nearby to throw the record into the trash. What is especially interesting is that during rumination, brain areas connected to self-reflection, inner dialogue, memory, and emotions become active. In simple terms, the brain doesn't file resentment away in the archives. It behaves like a shitty film editor. It takes an old recording, rewinds it, watches it again, adds a director's commentary, and releases a 10th anniversary remaster of the conflict. But now comes the strangest fact. Ready? Your body can react to the memory of a resentment as if the danger exists right now. And that's not a metaphor anymore. In Whitlett's famous study, participants were asked to recall real resentments. No actual conflicts, no threats, just memories. And what happened? Their heart rate increased, their blood pressure went up, their psychological arousal increased. Just for a second. The person is sitting in a laboratory. The greatest threat in the room is a badly parked chair. But the body behaves as if a fight is about to break out. Why? Because the brain has activated an old threat again, which creates a paradox. If someone hurt us once and then we remember that event 1,000 times, for the body it's no longer one stress reaction. It's 1,000 stress reactions. Please sign here. Which means that the main sponsor of our suffering has long since become ourselves. Jellyfish, sting me if I'm wrong. And this is where the most unpleasant thought in the entire video appears. Perhaps the hardest part of resentment doesn't happen when someone offends us, but afterwards, a week later, a month later, a year later, when the brain keeps pulling that recording out of the archive and playing it again, and again, and again. And if you remember in this video right here, we talked about how much the brain loves loops. Absolutely loves them, like kids love a carousel. Remember the chain? Event, interpretation, emotion. Well, with resentment, that pattern sometimes turns into a washing machine and looks like this. Resentment, that wasn't fair, even more resentment. A sort of positive feedback loop, which is why many old resentments survive not because the person is still in the humiliating situation, but because the brain keeps returning to the question, was that fair? And as long as that question remains psychologically open, the system keeps launching the emotional reaction again and again. Which is why for many people what helps isn't finding the perfect explanation for the past, but acknowledging, yes, it wasn't fair, yes, it happened, yes, I've already learned from it. At that point, the cycle loses its fuel, because the brain stops treating the situation as an unfinished task that requires another round of analysis. When scientists study forgiveness, they look at it very differently from many people. In science, forgiveness isn't an indulgence for the offender, not an admission that they were right, not an amnesty, not an obligation to start talking to them again. From a neurobiological point of view, forgiveness looks much more prosaic. It's a way to stop manually starting an old stress program, for the sake of our own nervous system, and its health first and foremost. Studies from recent years show a rather curious thing. This isn't about forgiveness curing cancer, hemorrhoids, mortgages, and stock market crashes. The scientific evidence points to something much more boring, but much more convincing. In a study by Tusen and colleagues, it turned out that the connection between forgiveness and well-being mostly goes through stress. People who were more stuck in old conflicts generally reported higher levels of stress. Holy shit! And high stress, as it turns out, has never made anyone happy, healthy, and beautiful like Jennifer Lopez. Later, a meta-analysis by Rasmussen and colleagues combined the results of many studies and came to a similar conclusion. The most reliable connections were found between forgiveness and psychological well-being. Connections with physical health were also present, but noticeably weaker. So modern science is more likely to say not resentment causes every illness, but people who spend years living inside all conflicts in their heads generally feel much worse. I had one case. One day I met up with some friends at someone's home. Everything was great. We were chatting, laughing, drinking wine, discussing stock prices, the Higgs boson and exes. Just a normal girls' night.
To us, and those who want to be us.
Then one of us started talking about an intelligent article she had read somewhere. It said that you shouldn't bottle up your emotions. You should let them out. Otherwise, you might die of heart attack, but she was still so young. The article also said that everyone should tell the truth about everyone, to their face. I don't know whether the article mentioned that this was all a joke of humor and that experiments like this should only be conducted in sterile sealed laboratories, preferably on another planet and preferably without people. But my friend threw herself into the task with great enthusiasm. And over the next hour she told us all the truth she had been collecting for years, including remind me of something I had said jokingly at her birthday party and immediately forgotten. Well, at least I thought it had been forgotten. Honestly, I don't remember the joke itself, but knowing me, everyone understood it except this friend. And she chose to age that resentment like a fine wine and bring it up not right away, but 10 fucking years later.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
Not only I got hit by it, my other friend got hit too. The accusations put down on us like badly laid tiles from a wall. There were resentments, a whole pile of complaints that we looked wrong, laughed wrong, and were even having sex their own way. Can you imagine? I apologized for that unfortunate joke, but apparently, in her view, I was supposed to fall to my knees and beg for forgiveness through tears for this terrible sin. Because she kept repeating again and again how hurt she had been and how I could possibly have done such a thing. Awful. That grand fall from grace somehow wasn't in my script. I do occasionally like making sharp and unsuccessful jokes. I apologized, but I'm not going to weep myself in the town square in front of all mortal beings, am I? Ask the squids I tried. Since then, we stopped talking. But my other friend kept in touch with her for a while. And then she got shit too. Apparently, she also said something wrong, looked the wrong way, farted the wrong way, and got banned too. In the end, thanks to that wonderful article that burst the whole abscess open, our easily offended friend ended up completely alone. Because telling the truth to people's faces is all well and good. Good, because now she can listen only to birds in the forest. And judging by everything, now the birds are in the risk zone too.
Uh-oh.
And she isn't the only one. I know several people who don't talk to anyone and spend chewing over their resentments the way our tongue keeps going back to the hole in a bad tooth. It hurts, it's unpleasant, but you just can't stop. And of course, they live alone and suffer from it. Because no sane person wants to voluntarily dive into that cauldron of boiling shit that's bubbling away in their head 24 hours a day. Especially since all the previous would-be helpers have long since been boiled in it. And here's what personally seems the saddest part of this whole story to me. Not that somebody once hurt us, but that a person starts carrying that story around for decades, as if they'd won the lottery. Only instead of $1 million, they got a bag of shit. And then they carry it around for 20 years, show it to everyone, open it, air it out, sort through the contents, tell people exactly who gave them that bag. Although at some point, people around them no longer see the offender. They only see a person who, for some reason, keeps dragging a bag of shit around. Which is why forgiveness isn't a gift to the offender. It's the moment when you finally put that bag down and move on lighter. Because life is too short and shit is heavy and smells. And now it's time for me to dive. My personal sea devil has once again eaten how the squid supplies and claims it was emotional support. I swear by my tail, that's his explanation every single time.